Welcome to Lesson 2 of my Linux command line course. This video is an introduction to the Linux file system. Specifically, I will explain how Linux organizes files and how the user moves around the file system structure in the terminal. Beginners usually struggle with understanding the system layout, which makes this and the following video probably the most important lesson out of this entire course. Let's start with what should be familiar to you. In the graphical file manager, the file system is presented to the user as a system of interconnected folder icons with contents in them, which form together a hierarchical structure shaped like an upside-down tree. On a typical PC, the user can navigate the structure using the mouse or keyboard. A more technical term for a folder is directory. However you call it, this basic building block is how the system and the user organize and keep track of files. The topmost directory is called the root directory and is represented by a special symbol, the /. Unlike Windows, which has multiple file system trees indicated by drive letters, Linux has only one tree. All storage devices and other resources will appear somewhere under the root in one of the standard system directories. For example, if I connect a USB memory stick right now, it will appear under /media/pi as a directory matching the USB memory stick label. The location for external USB storage devices will vary between Linux distributions, with /media being applicable to the Debian Linux family, which Raspberry Pi OS is based on. The root directory contains a number of system subdirectories with names that are fairly consistent across the entire family of Unix-like operating systems. A beginner does not really need to concern themselves with most of these high-level directories other than media, with maybe the exception of two, the /root and /home directories. Other directories contain various parts of the operating system, and you may want to wait with exploring them until you have gained more experience. The root directory represented by the / symbol must not be confused with the directory actually named root, ROOT. The /root directory is the home of the system administrator user, called the root user. Just remember, whenever you hear the term root directory, it's the topmost directory, the one represented by the / alone. The /home directory is typically where all regular user home directories are located. You will find one directory inside /home for each regular user of the system, with a name matching the user's name. My system has 3 user accounts, Alice, Bob, and Pi, and I'm currently logged in as user Pi. User home directories are used by their owners to keep their files, and the users have full control over their home directory contents. Beginners often confuse the /home directory with their home directory. I always found the /home name to be rather unfortunate, as homes would be much more appropriate. Let's have a look at the file system again, but this time in the terminal. By the way, from now on I will use the terminal term generally representing the command line interface. A terminal can be a Linux desktop application, which I am using currently, or a remote connection application such as PuTTY. To be precise, the terminal is just a user interface, and all the command functionality is actually tied to a program called shell, which runs inside of the terminal. It is the shell that gives us the prompt and the cursor, and it is the shell that accepts and processes the commands and provides output to the terminal. There are several types of shells available for Linux, but most of them perform the same role and have the same commands when it comes to basic operations. The default Linux shell is called bash, which is an acronym for Born Again Shell, and it is the shell I'll be using for this course. Very often, the terms terminal, command line, and shell are used interchangeably, but you don't need to concern yourself with such details until you'll start learning about process control and shell scripting. The user normally starts in their home directory in a new terminal, or it can be described in more technical language as the user's present working directory is their home in a new terminal. In the previous video, I introduced the pwd command, which will print the present working directory. Now that you know a bit more how the file system is structured, we can look closer at the information provided by the pwd command. What you see here is called a path, or path name, which is a spelled out location of a directory on the file system. Paths are read left to right, and this path starts with the root directory, followed by home directory, and it is concluded by the pi directory. This path essentially spells out how to get to the pi directory on this file system. You could also explain this path as follows. The root directory contains the home directory, which in turn contains the pi directory. Pieces of a path are separated using forward slashes. In this case, there is just one separator, but there would be more separators in a longer path. Slashes in the middle of a path are not parts of the directory names, but are rather visual separators between the pieces of the path. Any slashes featured in the middle of the path must not be confused with the slash at the beginning of the path, which is the root directory, the very top of the file system. This is a very important lesson and a great source of confusion for beginners. The slash is just the first special character which changes its meaning in the terminal depending on where and how it is used. The path concept is actually not new to you, but you probably never really noticed it. Just open a web browser, go to your favorite website, and have a look at the address bar. Does it look familiar? The website URL is a remote file system overlay, and all websites are built on top of the very file system layout which you are learning about in this video. The cd command is used to move around the file system in the terminal. It is equivalent to clicking or double-clicking on folders in the graphical file manager. The cd command changes your present working directory to one provided as a parameter. For example, this is how you go into the root directory. Or here's how you go into the /tmp directory. And now back to my home directory. Notice there's always a space between the command and the path. The shell will otherwise produce an error. It is very important to note that there are no spaces anywhere in this path, as none of the directories have spaces in their names, and we never put spaces around the separator slashes. Added spaces may look nice to some human operators, but a path with spaces included will mean something different than without them. As a side note, there is a general rule not to use spaces in file and directory names under Linux. I will explain it in more detail in a later video. The cd command expects one path as a parameter in the form of a valid path name, as you just saw, but there are a couple of handy shortcuts. If you specify just a dash instead of a path, the cd command will take you back to your previous location. For example, if I use this syntax right now, I will wind up back in the /tmp directory, which was my last working directory. The shell will print the present working directory after using the shortcut. Another shortcut involves using the cd command without any path. A cd command by itself will always take you back to your home directory. This is just like pressing the home button in the graphical file manager. Try to remember that one. Knowing where you are is important, and the pwd command is handy in that regard. However, I do not use it much myself. As you may have noticed, the terminal tells me where I am automatically, in two places actually. The first place is the shell prompt. The other one is the terminal window title bar. What you are shown there depends on account settings. The Raspberry Pi environment shows the path in short notation by default, replacing the user home directory portion of the path with the tilde character. The tilde key should be located in the upper left corner on most PC's keyboard. Tilde is another character which has special meaning to the shell. Internally, it represents the path to the user's home directory. Whenever you use the tilde character with a command, either on its own or at the beginning of a path, the shell will substitute the tilde transparently with the fully expanded path to the home directory. As it is a feature of the shell, this substitution happens regardless of the command used at that moment. Here's what happens when you use the tilde with the echo command, which is the shell's print statement. The echo command here reveals how the shell sees the tilde character. I am logged in as user pi, so the tilde means /home/pi. If I log in as another user, for example, user Alice, then the tilde character means /home/Alice. You can use the tilde character in a path with any command whenever you want to refer to your home directory itself or something inside your home directory. For example, if I would like to go to my desktop directory, I could do it using the full path starting with /. Let me go back. Now I will do it using the shortened notation using tilde. Either way, I wind up in my desktop directory, but the second method is better since it requires fewer keystrokes. Always try to use a shorter path name whenever you have a choice. Have you noticed that desktop starts with capital D? Path names are case sensitive, and a command like this will not work. You need to make sure that the names of directories and files in path names match the actual names in the file system. These two path name styles are called absolute and relative to home. Any path that starts with a / is called an absolute path. All absolute path names start from the root directory, and they can be used to access the entire file system. Whenever a path starts with a tilde character, it is called relative to home. Relative to home path names only give access to contents of users' home directories. The tilde character should not be used in the middle of the path, only at the beginning of the path, or by itself, otherwise it doesn't work. Here's an example. In this case, the tilde is treated literally by the shell, and it is not substituted with /home/pi. There's no directory called tilde directly under the root directory, so the cd command produces an error. I see beginners making this mistake all the time. This is very similar to the way the / is treated in path names, which you already know about. The / only has a special meaning to the shell if it is at the beginning of the path, where it means the root directory. Otherwise, it is only a visual separator for the human operator. The tilde character can be used to refer to other users' home directories too. You could always use absolute path names starting with /home. For example, this is how I would go to user Alice's documents directory. This absolute path is fairly long, but just like before, the tilde character can be used to shorten it. Let me go back. Here's the equivalent using a relative to home path name. As you can see, the rules for relative to home path names with other users' home directories are similar to your own home directory. You still start with the tilde character, but for other users' home directory, you directly follow the tilde with the other user's name. It is very important to realize that there is no / directly after the tilde when accessing other users' home directories. If I put the / after tilde, the path would be understood by the shell as accessing directory documents located in a directory called Alice, with the Alice directory being in my home directory, which does not exist, at least not at this moment. For comparison, this is how I would access my documents directory using a relative to home path name. Again, relative to home path name is shorter than the absolute one, as I do not type the /home/pi portion. Many shell commands work with files and directories, so what you learned in this video is directly applicable across a wide range of operations, not just the cd command. Take the ls command for example. By default, the ls command lists the contents of the present working directory. Right now I am in my documents directory. If I would like to list the contents of another directory, I can use the cd command first to go there and issue the ls command after. For example, however, changing your present working directory makes sense only if you are planning to do more than just one operation there. Otherwise, you give yourself more work by going to the other directory and coming back right away. The ls command accepts a path as a parameter. This means that I can list any directory on the file system without leaving my current directory. This is how it's done. The unnecessary use of the cd command is one of the main mistakes I see beginners make. Sadly, even experienced command line users often do not lose this habit. It's probably because the graphical environment forces users to move into a specific location to do anything, but the command line is much more efficient in that regard. You need to get out of your comfort zone in order to work faster and more efficiently. Since I am talking about bad habits, avoid touching the mouse or touchpad when you work with the command line. It is another behavior that I see in beginners. An easy fix is moving the mouse out of your reach if you catch yourself doing that. The ls command can actually list multiple directories at once. As it is not possible to be in two places at once, using cd before ls makes even less sense in such scenario. Here's an example of listing the root and my downloads directories at the same time. If you use a command with multiple path names, whether there are 2 or 200, you need to separate the path names by using a space. The same rule applies if you use command options with path names. Here is the listing of the same directories as above, but this time in the long format. If you use command options, the tokens that start with a dash, they can be placed in any position after the command, but most people place them right after the command with the path names at the end of the command line. Notice that I mixed the two different path styles with the ls command. You can do that as it suits you with all commands to achieve the shortest paths possible in terms of keystrokes. That's it for this lesson. Go ahead to the next installment, but please hit the like button and subscribe first. The next video will introduce you to a third and final path style, which is actually used the most often, as it typically forms path names that are shortest. Thanks for watching.